Welcome back to Raid Guides in a Trenchcoat featuring Prophecy, the answer to an unknown question. When the Black Garden asks a question, the Vex are the answer. I think that's a cinematic somewhere. But when a Vanguard more desperate than all of the horny singles in my area ask a question, the 9 concoct some convoluted bullshit riddle dungeon complete with a fully functional day-night cycle and everyone's favorite, moats. The primary mechanic of the dungeon is the light and dark zones created by the arbitrary ambiguous sources of light that tend to render in different ways depending on if you play the game in 4K or in 240p. I can't visualize this joke well with my Irish killing potato of a computer, but you get the idea. Killing a taken knight while in one of these zones will cause it to drop 3 of the corresponding flavor of moat, dark or light. Collecting 5 of the same moat gives you an even bigger moat, which can then be dunked to clear these ley line looking things. This is all super simple on paper. The reality, however, is that the shadows and shapes on the ground have severely limited correlation to where the light and dark zones are coded to be, especially in the second room where you have the light zones, diet light zones, light zone 0, and the tiniest fucking gerrymandered sliver of darkness. The only way to truly know for sure is via the little swirling overlay on the sides of your screen. If the knight dies while the screen has black swirls, the moats generated will be dark, and vice versa with the light. To pepper insult to injury, you can only hold one type of moat at a time, and picking up moats when you accidentally shotgun a knight from the wrong zone will wipe away all of your original moats and restart your counter with the new type. With all that out of the way, the introduction teaches you these mechanics via 2 rooms where you have to dunk 1 dark and 1 light each, or crawl through the paracausal maintenance shafts and up into the first encounter. The Taken Phalanx encounter is an itty-bitty, teeny, tiny, claustrophobic platform stuffed to the brim with taken enemies and edges you can be phalanxed off of. 3 taken knights will spawn and you'll be faced with the light and dark zones from before. Focus down 2 of those knights and pop them like the gambit pinatas that they are to get your desired flavor of Toblerone. You'll then combine them together to get an even bigger white or dark chocolate mess, and this is where you have a bit of choice in how to next progress. You could do the encounter as intended, picking up your dunkable moats and doing each of the plates individually, or you could channel your inner one-trick diva main and launch yourself up high into the sky, dunk in midair with the intention of snapshotting both of the appropriate plates, and hope that it plays out better than trickle-down economics. Regardless of the path that you choose, the day-night cycle will progress, changing where the light and dark zones are, which may make it then next to impossible to get the color of moat you actually need. Kill the 3rd knight, and then clench your butt cheeks because every single ad is going to respawn at once. Continue to grab and dunk until you reach the damage phase. Along with the boss's shield dropping, a whole troop of backup dancing taken goblins will spawn to continue making the boss immune. Luckily, the damage phase lasts longer than an unpaid Crunchyroll commercial break, but you'll still struggle to get any meaningful uptime if the goblins are left unchecked. Slaughter them and slap the boss until he dies, or get exiled back into Mechanics Jail to gather up more Toblerone. When you do kill the boss, step into the fuchsia magenta glow and sink down into the sands of Agrabah where the ruins of fallen destinations sit dormant. That said, taken enemies have taken up residence in each of the 4 areas and you'll need to brave their scorn and wipe out their cabals. Find the camp with the 3 blights, pop them, and then head off to find the next spawn. You'll visit fragments of Mercury, Mars, Io, and Titan, but not necessarily in that order. Also, mind the massive invisible minotaurs skulking around everywhere. With all of the blights cleared, find the square doorway and race on through the neon hallway. For this encounter, you'll once again be playing with moats, big moats, and ley lines. But also, our good old melodramatic buddy Toland is here. To start, just walk half a step past the rally flag. In this claustrophobic as fuck room, a large quantity of ads will spawn, the most important and deadly of which being the 2 taken hobgoblins which have scaled the walls like mountain goats searching for a salty lick. For each of those that you kill, a moat dropping knight will spawn somewhere on the ground which you'll need to deal with like before. But unlike previous encounters, you can't arbitrarily pick a ley line to cleanse because as soon as you clear one, the hobgoblins and knights will despawn, which leads to the center sand circle activating. Step into it, and now you're walking on what was previously the wall that correlates to the ley line that you dunked on. Technically speaking, you can cleanse whichever ley line you want, and eventually, with time, perseverance, and a lot more time, you'll stumble into the correct pattern and reach the end of the encounter. But for those of us who need to work during the day for our electric bill to be paid, you'll have to dunk on the correct ley line, signified by a jittery floating Toland. If you ever can't find him on a wall, he might be hiding out on the ceiling, which is the equivalent of your partner saying, "No, it's okay, you decide what we're eating for dinner." And then none of the 4 options that you have will be correct. Following his lead will cause circles to be imprinted into the hexahedron, the thing in the air which is not a cube. Fill in the hexahedron and end yourself up on the ceiling to spawn in the encounter bosses. 2 Taken Centurions that make strike bosses look like damage sponges by comparison. Collect your loot and exit through the same neon hallway that you entered from. Try not to think too hard about the physics now that you're technically on the ceiling instead of the floor, and oh, would you look at that, you're back in Agrabah. Were you today years old when you learned that Agrabah isn't a real place? Disney really did stunt some people early, and that's okay. Once you're back out in the sands, you'll want to head roughly north by northwest to get to the only other doorway in this rundown expanse. But first, you can hunt down the Emissary of the Nine for some fun dialogue where Drifter and Eris talk about things that happened years ago. 8 out of 10 for nostalgia, and maybe a 50-50 on if anyone who started during the Witch Queen boom will understand. There's also a secret chest underneath this pylon over here. Anyhow, head on up to the doorway, through the psychedelic underpass, and into... Welcome to Rainbow Road, the Mario Kart with Guns simulator that was on nobody's bingo card coming into Season of Arrivals. You have a few options for how to traverse these perilous ribbon roads. The first is normally, where you race down the ribbon roads avoiding the snipers and dropping off edges before they do full 360-degree twists. The next lowest strat is jumping down these polyhedral platforms manually, followed by a strat of skating from big tetrahedron to big tetrahedron, or you could embrace a strat of sparrow flying to the end. I don't know that sparrow flying is faster, I never learned how to do it, but I'm kicking myself in hindsight because a Funny Gun's 2x Eager Edge shatter skate would have absolutely taken you from start to finish in one attempt, which would have been beautiful footage. Anyhow, from the endpoint you'll get beamed up into this UTI, unidentified tetrahedral installation, where you'll slam a few hordes of Taken and then enter the final encounter. The Kel Echo is the final boss, but compared to all the back and forth dunking of Hexahedron, this one is a cakewalk. Really, it's more of a cake calculated leaps, but we'll get there. In either case, you'll end up in another large geometric room, except the mobs that have spawned have taken every square inch of the zip code as their own domain, so there are effectively 0 safe spots. The best way to proceed is to pick one of the 3 corners, get the motes to make the thick Toblerone, and then cleanse that corner to send the boss away. The only downside to this is the boss's place is going to be taken by a Taken Ogre who has eaten far fewer Snickers in his life than the Kel Echo. As such, he's going to be a hair more aggressive when it comes to focusing you down with his Taken Ogre Psybeam attack. But psychic moves aren't strong against dark types, so running either Stasis or Strand should avail you, but maybe that's just copium. With one of the ogres down, you'll now have a corner of the room to retreat to, which will make surviving the other 2 ley line cleanses far easier. After killing them, the purple lavender fuchsia light from before will return to the center of the arena so that you can sink down to the DPS floor. After an initial period of baking, the DPS phase will turn into more of a frenzied cooking endeavor as it has you chasing the boss down a long corridor of platforms. There'll be a large ring of energy surrounding the boss that you'll need to stay inside of, or else you'll start getting stacks of a debuff called Dark Entropy. 10 stacks of that, and you die. To make that ring more of a threat to specifically shotgun apes, the boss also has Bartholomew Kuma's Niku fruit and can reflect you into flying out of the circle, which nobody took the time to animate, so it just kind of blurs your screen a little bit and then suddenly you're far away. Catch back up and maybe dodge the attack next time. In any case, the damage phase ends shortly after the boss reaches the shore on the other side of the archipelago, or when you disintegrate it because of 3 years plus worth of power creep. But before I can congratulate you on completing Prophecy, there is another matter with which we must attend. Take out your spinfoil hats because the prophecy in Prophecy is supposedly alluded to our future at its time of release, and unlike the hacky shrink psychics in the basement of your neighborhood bodega, Bungie was able to design this prophecy with their future story plans in mind. It doesn't make this prophecy any more true, especially after what happened to Lightfall, but hey, it probably was true at one point. So the obvious first point of the analysis is the light and dark modes alluding to the incoming light subclass reworks alongside the release of darkness subclasses, specifically the addition of fragments. Obviously. All of the fragments and aspects coming together to make one full subclass. In the first encounter, we fight a Phalanx, specifically one that is made immune by outside influence when she is at her most vulnerable. I say she because this is definitely alluding to Keitel, and Zavala sticking his pesky diplomatic immunity into Keitel, forging the alliance that gave way to having War Beasts and Iron Banner. The changing day-night cycles therein alluding to this being a long-standing alliance which stands the test of time. The destinations buried in the sand are the 4 destinations that were slated to be consumed by the darkness. But we already knew that. That was surface level. That was in a TWAB way before they stopped being called TWABs. The real pieces of foreshadowing here are the invisible minotaurs running around everywhere alluding to the endless night and the events of Season of the Splicer. Invisible Vex and Taken Blights? Totally Gloria. The hexahedron is a bit more complex, because it's all about looking at things from different angles to see all their facets and intricacies. Now, a normal interpretation of this might lead you to concluding that this has to do with the light and dark, or even just the dark since the hexahedron is itself black, a way for the 9 to, like the witness later would, coax us to accept the darkness. But I think that's a reach. The key to understanding hexahedron lies not in the light and the dark, but in the number 6. More specifically, the number 7. 6 plus 1. The hexahedron plus the guardian. These are the 7 faces of the enemy. The witness. Wrath. Nezarec. Pride. Rulk, Gluttony, Callous, Lust, Savathun. You may be scoffing at me right now, but the entirety of Season of the Witch was spent trying to get Eris and Zuth to fuck. Savathun may not continue to be a disciple, but she was at one point, according to our next disciple, Sloth, who is the disciple alluded to in the Cave lore chapter. Envy would be the dead disciple that was meant to be replaced by Aramis, and then the Guardian, disciple of Greed. I've seen your vaults, don't you fucking try to hide your subpart Adept Igneous Hammer or the Sunset Galron's right hand you can't bring yourself to delete. That's 7. Rainbow Road is showing us the subclasses of the light as ribbons, all different yet taking us to ultimately the same place, as if to say that we're on a set course with the light and the only way to change that path is to use something else, like the darkness, to parkour along the floating geometric shapes. Additionally, you'll notice that you cannot follow any one ribbon from the start to the end, because it'll twist around and dump you off. This is the 9's sly way of saying that, hey, you cannot just run whatever subclass you want in any situation. There is no one subclass that gets you from start to finish. You can't well for Rulk, you can't Thunder Crash across the Crota Bridge, and you certainly can't Spectral Blaze the Sanctified Mind. Sometimes you'll have to switch to a different path for the good of the team. Oh, and that's Aramis. So now I can, for real this time, congratulate you on completing the prophecy. Here's to hoping that the 9 will make another convoluted playground for us to psychoanalyze in the next saga. Go watch a real guide.